My mother persuaded my boyfriend to marry my sister. She told him she's stronger and better for you. I was devastated when I found out and left Boston to start over. Years later, we met again at a luxury rooftop gala I hosted in Seattle, and when they saw my husband, their faces drained of color because my husband was. I never thought I'd hear those words from my own mother's lips. She's stronger and better for you. The sentence sliced through me like a blade as I stood frozen in the hallway outside the study during my cousin's graduation dinner. My boyfriend of 3 years, Ethan, had gone to get us drinks, but when he didn't return, I went to find him. I wish I had. Claire is sweet, my mother said, but Vanessa has always been the driven one, the one with promise. Her tone was light, like sharing a cooking tip. You deserve someone who'll elevate you, not weigh you down. I peeked through the doorway crack, watching Ethan's face shift from surprise to quietly intrigued. He didn't speak up, didn't laugh it off, just stood there holding our untouched drinks. Listen, I've always thought you and Vanessa had more spark, Margaret went on, patting his arm with affection that made me nauseous. She's had her eye on you for years. Just waiting. I don't know, Mrs. Bennett. Ethan's pause already felt like betrayal. Claire and I have been together a while. And what's to show for it? She countered, lifting her brow. Vanessa just made partner at the firm. Claire? Still pouring lattes and drawing sketches no one buys. Her dismissal of my art stung, but Ethan's pensive nod was what broke me. I backed away, somehow stayed composed through the rest of the night, though a storm churned in me. I should have ended it, confronted them then and there, but I didn't. I smiled. That was my first mistake. At first it was subtle. Ethan started bringing up Vanessa in random chatter. Her courtroom win, her fitness gains. Each mention nicked me tiny but deep. Then came cancelled dates, late nights, a new interest in legal dramas, ones Vanessa had suggested. One day I saw texts, lunch plans I'd never heard of. When I asked, he brushed it off. We ran into each other downtown. She's your sister, Claire. It'd be weird not to get along. His logic made me question myself. Was I just jealous? Family dinners became torture. I watched their silent glances, their smiles across the table. My best friend Maya saw it before I could admit it. Something's changed, she said one night, after Ethan left dinner early again. He doesn't look at you the same anymore. We're in a rough patch, I replied, forcing the lie. Everyone goes through it. The moment of undeniable truth came 3 months after that conversation in the study. I stopped by Ethan's apartment unannounced, hoping to surprise him with concert tickets for a band he loved. I still had a key. We'd been talking about moving in together before everything shifted. The place was silent when I stepped in, but a trail of clothes led to the bedroom. A silk blouse I recognized, Vanessa's favorite, was crumpled on the hallway floor. The door was slightly ajar. The sounds from inside confirmed everything before I even touched. Vanessa's long brunette hair spilled across Ethan's bare chest as they lay tangled in his sheets, too lost in each other to notice me until the tickets slipped from my hand. They scattered like torn-up promises across the hardwood floor. Claire? Ethan jolted upright, scrambling to cover himself. Vanessa just stared, more irritated than guilty. This isn't. Don't, I interrupted. My voice sounded like it belonged to someone else. Don't tell me it's not what it looks like. I'm not stupid. Vanessa sat up slowly, unfazed, making no attempt to hide. You were going to find out eventually. Maybe it's better this way. Their calmness hit harder than any wild apology ever could. This wasn't a slip-up. This was calculated. How? I asked, though the answer barely mattered anymore. 2 months. Officially, Ethan muttered, eyes cast down. But we've been talking longer. Since the day my mom talked to you, I finished. Their stunned silence told me I'd hit the mark. I knew more than they I didn't scream, didn't throw anything, though I wanted to. I just left. The fury would come later. In that moment I felt scraped hollow, like everything inside me had been vacuumed out. The next morning, I faced the last person left to confront. My mother. Her kitchen was pristine, not a flower out of place, just like the day she'd quietly destroyed my relationship. Don't be dramatic, Claire, she said, arranging peonies like she was discussing weather. Relationships end all the time. Vanessa and Ethan make more sense. Why would you do this? My voice cracked. To your own daughter. She finally looked at me. Because Vanessa's always worked harder. She aimed higher. She deserves a man who matches her ambition. She touched my cheek with her usual cold calm. You've always been the soft one, a dreamer. You'll find someone more suited to your temperament. And just like that it all clicked. She had never really seen me, never valued me. In her eyes I'd always be the lesser daughter, the one who chose paint over prestige. "You're wrong about me," I whispered. "You always have been." That night I packed everything that would fit into my car. Most of my place was furnished with second-hand pieces. Nothing worth clinging to. Maya helped me, offering her couch until I figured things out. But I already had a plan. I didn't just want a new apartment. I needed a clean slate. A whole new life somewhere far from Ethan and Vanessa and the echoes of betrayal. "Are you sure?" Maya asked as I loaded the last box. "Running away won't fix everything." "I'm not running," I replied, with a strange calm I hadn't felt in weeks. "I'm moving forward." The next morning, I left behind a short note. No drama, no accusations, just 3 words: "Watch me thrive." With only my art portfolio, 2 months' worth of savings and heartbreak transformed into drive, I pointed my car towards Seattle, a city where no one knew my name or how easily I'd been replaced. Seattle greeted me with a torrential downpour. How fitting, I thought as my wipers fought to keep up with the sheets of rain. My GPS guided me to a modest roadside motel on the city's industrial edge, the only place my dwindling savings could afford while I figured out something more permanent. The room smelled like old cigarettes and cheap pine-scented air freshener. I dropped my bags, sat on the edge of the thin mattress and allowed myself 5 minutes to cry. Then when the alarm on my phone buzzed, I wiped my face, flipped open my laptop and began the hunt. Apartments, jobs, anything. 3 days and 12 exhausting apartment viewings later, I signed a lease on a tiny studio in Capitol Hill. "Full of character," my realtor had said optimistically. She meant it was ancient. The elevator broke weekly and my neighbors included a violinist who practiced at midnight and a rotating cast of hospitality workers on opposite schedule. The rent devoured 2/3 of what was left in my bank account. I stared at my reflection that night, pinning job listings to the fridge with pizza slice magnets, the only decor in my new life. "You have 30 days, I told myself. "Find work or admit defeat." On day 28, after endless rejections and ghosted applications, I walked into my final interview. Merritt & Co. Investments. The receptionist gestured to the waiting area. Another woman sat across from me, flipping notes in a tailored designer suit that made my carefully ironed thrift store dress feel like a paper napkin. "Miss Bennett," a woman with a sleek bob and barely there glasses appeared. "I'm Nina Harper from HR. I'm afraid there's been a My stomach dropped. "The admin role's been filled internally," she said. "But Mr. Carter wanted to know if you'd consider a different opening, executive assistant to one of our junior partners." She led me through a maze of glass-walled offices until we stopped at a corner desk buried in takeout boxes and financial reports. A man looked up, exhaustion etched beneath his scruffy jawline. Yet somehow the dishevelment made him more magnetic. "James Carter," he said, standing to shake my hand. "Apologies for the chaos year-end reporting season. My last assistant quit mid-email." "Claire Bennett," I replied, surprised by his steady handshake and the way his gaze didn't wander. "I'm open to any job with a paycheck." He chuckled, nodding. "I appreciate the honesty. Sit. Tell me why an art major from the East Coast wants to work at a Seattle investment firm." I could have spun something polished about career pivots or long-term plans, but what came out was raw. Because sometimes starting over means burning your old map and sketching a new one from scratch. For a second I panicked, too poetic, too weird. But James just leaned back slowly and nodded. "I've done some map burning myself." He shifted a folder aside. "The pay's lower than what you applied for, but it has room to grow. Hours are brutal, expectations high, and apparently I'm difficult." "I've survived worse," I said, thinking of my mother's voice, cold as crystal, "and I learn fast." He hired me on the spot. I started the next morning. The following weeks tested every limit I had. James worked 16-hour days, buried in numbers and strategy. I fetched coffees that went untouched, meals that turned cold, while quietly building order from chaos, color-coding client lists, reorganizing his files by risk level instead of alphabet. One night at 11 p.m. he looked up, surprised to still see me. "Why are you here?" "The work's not done," I answered, like it was obvious. There were awkward moments too, like the night he accidentally sent me a text meant for his brother ranting about a nightmare date, or when I spilled espresso on client contracts and nearly burst into tears. "It's just paper," he'd said, helping blot the mess. "The data's backed up. Breathe, Claire." Gradually our lunch breaks turned into tiny escapes. James insisted I get out of the office, dragging me to taco trucks or hole-in-the-wall faux spots. We talked about everything but work. He told me about restoring his late uncle's vintage motorcycle, about hiking the Cascades as a kid. I told him vaguely about growing up around cold expectations, how I once painted more than I slept. "You're a bit of a mystery, Bennett," he said one day between bites of banh mi. "Most people talk endlessly about themselves. Most people have stories worth telling," I deflected, but he didn't push. And maybe that's why, slowly, I started to believe mine was just beginning. As months passed, our professional rhythm synced effortlessly, and our personal connection deepened in ways neither of us had planned. James began asking for my feedback on presentations, genuinely listening to my suggestions. I in turn started to anticipate his needs before he voiced them, organizing, reworking client decks, smoothing out small disasters before they happened. Late nights shifted from quiet tension to a sort of comfortable partnership. The silence became companionable. We worked side by side, our energy aligned. Every so often one of us would drop something personal into the mix, like a stone tossed into still water. "My dad wanted me to run his construction company," James admitted one night, eyes heavy as he slouched in his office chair. "Thinks finance is just shuffling other people's money around. We haven't spoken in years. My mom always preferred my sister," I confessed, surprised at myself. It was the first time I'd mentioned my family. Nothing I did was ever quite enough. He didn't rush in with platitudes or hollow comfort, just nodded quietly. That kind of silence, understanding without judgment, healed something more than words could. 6 months into my Seattle restart, James invited me to dinner. A real one, not desk noodles or sandwiches eaten between emails. I figured we were celebrating a client win. But when dessert came, so did something unexpected. A leather-bound folder slid across the table toward me. "I've been working on this for 3 years," he said as I opened. "A boutique firm, focused on sustainable businesses, first-gen entrepreneurs, the ones traditional investors overlook." I flipped through the plan, clear, smart, built from conviction. "It's incredible," I said. "But why show me?" "Because I'm leaving Merit next month to launch it." His voice didn't waver. "And I want you with me. Not as an assistant, as operations manager." I blinked. "That's insane," I said, heart picking up speed. "I barely know what I'm doing half the time." "You know more than you think," James countered, leaning in. "And you bring something I don't: structure, clarity, gut instinct. I've built the vision. You've built the engine that makes it move." "It's a huge risk," I murmured, even as something inside me, something bold, something long buried, began to stir. "Huge," he agreed, smiling for real. "We could fall flat on our faces, but I'd rather crash trying to build something real than coast helping rich men get slightly richer." I studied him closely, looking for the arrogance I'd grown to distrust in others. But there was only fire in his eyes, passion, purpose, and trust. I didn't even realize the words had formed until they left my mouth. "When do we start?" And just like that, for the first time since leaving the East Coast, I felt like I was moving toward something, not just away. Our transition from coworkers to co-founders was effortless, but the shift from friendship to something more, that surprised both of us. It began subtly. Late nights discussing business turned into talks about childhood dreams, broken family ties, favorite songs. Dinners stretched beyond work agendas into laughter, wine, and stories neither of us had shared before. 6 months into launching Carter and Bennett Strategies, it happened. Outside our shared office, long after dark, snow falling like quiet applause around us. James kissed me. No build, no warning. Just a moment charged with the weight of everything we hadn't dared to say. The next morning we didn't talk about it. We were careful, professional, respectful of what we'd built. But when it happened again a week later, slower, softer, we both knew this wasn't an impulse. It was inevitable. "This could ruin everything," I whispered one night, my voice barely above the hum of our printer. "Or it could be the foundation for something even better," he replied, ever the dreamer to my grounded pragmatism. Our courtship didn't follow any rulebook. Boardroom briefings bled into shared breakfasts. Business trips turned into long weekends. We kept it quiet. In an industry where women were often seen as decorative rather than decisive, I refused to be viewed as a founder's romantic footnote. Within a year, James proposed, and in the most perfectly us way possible. We were in sweatpants, sitting on the living room floor, surrounded by spreadsheets and half-eaten takeout. He looked up from a Q4 projection, eyebrows furrowed in that way that usually meant a budgeting question. "Marry me," he said, as if he were confirming a calendar event. "Be my partner in everything. No ring, no big speech, Just certainty, pure and simple. People will say it's too fast, I murmured, though I already knew my answer. Let them, he shrugs. They don't know a thing about us. We were married 3 months later at the Seattle courthouse. Maya flew in from the East Coast to witness, and James's brother Daniel held the other signature line steady. I wore a simple cream wrap dress. He wore charcoal. We skipped the poetry and stuck to promises, honest ones. I choose you as my partner in all things, James said, gripping my hands like a lifeline. Before work, before success, before everything. His words stitched something back together inside me, pieces torn loose by betrayal and replaced with trust, and quiet, sturdy love. That night, our reception was takeout at the little Vietnamese place where we'd shared countless lunches in our early days. Mrs. Lean, the owner, had reserved a booth in the corner, decorated it with red lanterns, and brought out a bottle of champagne she'd been saving for something real. To partnerships that lift us higher, James toasted, eyes never leaving mine. Reality quickly overtook romance as the grind of startup life settled in. Our fledgling firm, Carter and Bennett Strategies, operated out of our one-bedroom Seattle apartment to cut overhead. The dining table doubled as a conference room, and our living room morphed into an office, file boxes stacked neatly beside thrifted lamps, printers disguised as side table. Client meetings were held in cafes, co-working lounges, or hotel lobbies, anywhere that felt established enough to mask the scrappy reality we lived daily. I picked up a part-time job at a local art gallery, just enough income to stretch our savings, while James chased down leads, cold-called prospects, and refined pitch decks late into the night. Our finances tightened with each passing month. More than once, I woke up at 3 to find him at the kitchen table, bathed in laptop glow, furiously reworking projections. We might need to take on more traditional clients, I suggested one night. Careful with my tone. Just until we're steady. If we do that now, he said quietly, we'll lose the soul of what we're building. His conviction was admirable, also terrifying. Our first real fight as a married couple erupted over money. James wanted to invest our emergency fund into marketing. I insisted we keep it untouched for rent, for food, for sanity. Voices rose. A door slammed. Silence followed. And then compromise, half for growth, half for survival. That became our rhythm, his fire my grounding, his ambition my strategy. A partnership built not just on love but on balance. 8 months in, opportunity finally arrived. A small sustainable energy startup was looking for investors who cared about more than returns, someone who understood purpose and long-term value. James threw himself into their proposal for weeks, crafting a pitch that blended data with heart. I stayed up designing sleek packets that reflected both professionalism and soul. They chose us over firms 10 times our size. They brought 3 other eco-conscious businesses with them. Just like that, we had traction. We need to celebrate, James declared, even as I glanced nervously at our account balance. That night, he surprised me by recreating our first unofficial date, takeout from our favorite Vietnamese spot, eaten on the floor around piles of spreadsheets. To our first big win, he toasted, raising a chipped mug of grocery store wine. And to my brilliant wife, who kept the faith even when I nearly lost it. After that, the momentum built. With every new client, our apartment shrank. Interns worked from our couch. Conference calls happened behind our closed bedroom door. We hit a breaking point the morning a key investor showed up early and caught me walking out of the bathroom in a towel. We need real office space, James admitted that night, rubbing his face in exhaustion. And maybe a home where I'm not storing contracts in the cereal box. With cautious hope, we signed a lease on a modest office in downtown Seattle and upgraded to a slightly bigger apartment, with a spare bedroom that didn't double as a storage closet. The separation between work and home brought a sense of balance we hadn't even realized we were missing. Then came the years of pure, relentless building. James built a reputation for integrity and vision in the sustainable investment space. His charisma and big-picture thinking opened doors across the Pacific Northwest. Meanwhile, I built the framework that made his vision scalable. Teams, systems, protocols. I turned sketches into strategy, concepts into infrastructure. We weren't just compatible, we were essential to each other's success. Our biggest milestone came without warning. A major investment group reached out with an offer to acquire Carter and Bennett Strategies, one that was generous, respectful, and came with a single condition. James would stay on as CEO of the newly created Sustainable Investment Division, overseeing all ethical portfolios, with full autonomy. I never imagined running something this big, he admitted the night the ink dried on the contracts. We stood in the kitchen of our new home, a modest but beautiful 3-bedroom, tucked into a leafy Seattle neighborhood we used to walk through wistfully, back when rent was a terrifying luxury. They didn't just buy the company, I reminded him, reaching to adjust his tie. They bought your vision, your integrity. The transition wasn't smooth. James began working longer hours, navigating corporate boardrooms, and billion-dollar expectations. I stepped into my new title as Chief Operations Officer, tasked with scaling our systems across a much bigger, more complex ecosystem. It was exhausting and exhilarating, watching James speak with the same conviction, in polished boardrooms, that he'd once shared across a cluttered coffee table in our apartment, filled me with pride so deep it made the sleepless nights feel worth it. "We did it," he whispered at the champagne toast that marked the public announcement of his appointment as CEO. "Together," I replied, watching him shake hands with executives who now answered to him. It wasn't lost on me how far we'd come from a rain-soaked motel night, with nothing but a portfolio and desperation, to this life, a life neither of us could have predicted, but both of us had built, brick by determined brick. 5 years into James's leadership, I had become more than just the wife. My operational systems formed the spine of the company's expansion into 3 new markets. Department heads regularly consulted me before making decisions. What we'd started as a 2-person experiment had grown into a thriving firm, guided by shared values. Our personal life found a rhythm too. Sunday mornings were sacred, newspapers pour over coffee, silence and sunlight. Once a month we hosted dinner parties with our tight-knit group of friends, often filled with too much wine and debates about everything from climate policy to classic rock albums. On long weekends we escaped to the Olympic Peninsula, where James had begun restoring a rusted-out vintage motorcycle in a rented garage like it was a meditation. We hadn't started a family yet, too busy nurturing the business that had become our shared dream, but the conversation had surfaced more than once, whispered at night like a maybe we were both starting to crave. Philadelphia felt like a different life, one I had carefully packed away. Maya visited occasionally, bringing neutral updates about familiar names, but never mentioning the ones that mattered most. It was our unspoken agreement. I thought I'd closed that chapter completely. Until one Tuesday morning. "You might want to see this," James said, sliding a financial magazine across our breakfast table. In the lower corner, a headline in small print: "Davis & Associates faces bankruptcy after national expansion fails." I stared at the words. Vanessa's firm, the one she'd started with Ethan, my ex, after he left his previous role to join her in a blaze of ambition and carefully cultivated power couple optics. "I didn't know you followed Philly legal news," I said, trying to sound unaffected while my heart jackhammered in my chest. "I don't," James replied, "but Merit Group, the parent company, is on our acquisition list. And Ethan's listed as part of their compliance team. Their legal work still outsources to Davis & Associates. I figured you'd rather hear it from me before someone else mentions it at a meeting." The article detailed a messy collapse, Vanessa's failed national expansion, clients abandoning ship, investors pulling out and spiraling debt. Ethan had quietly stepped away from the firm, landing a compliance role at Merit with a considerable salary downgrade. The irony settled in like morning fog. The stronger match my mother had championed was now crumbling. Meanwhile, I was seated in my kitchen, sunlight bouncing off quartz countertops, married to a man who saw my worth before the world did. "Does it change the acquisition plans?" I asked, forcing calm into my voice. "That depends entirely on you," James said, watching me carefully. "Merit's sustainable portfolio fits our growth model perfectly, but I'll walk away from the deal if you're not comfortable." That willingness to walk away from a smart strategic move just to spare me old wounds was exactly why I had married him. "Don't be ridiculous," I said, reaching for his hand. "It's just business." 2 weeks later, the acquisition was finalized. Merit Group would retain its brand identity but operate under our corporate umbrella. Ethan remained in his compliance role, technically now our employee, though several management layers sat between us. "We should host a gala," James suggested one evening while we reviewed quarterly numbers. "Celebrate the acquisition, showcase the new sustainable portfolio to investors, and properly introduce Merit's team to our company culture." It wasn't a surprising idea. We hosted an annual gathering each fall, usually at the Pacific Science Center in Seattle, where sustainability themes echoed through every exhibit and catered by. What caught me off guard was what James said next. "I think we should invite Ethan Brooks, and the senior partners from Philadelphia, legal reps too, any connected parties." My teacup hovered halfway to my mouth, suddenly forgot. "You want to invite my sister and my ex-boyfriend to our corporate gala?" James set down his notes, brow furrowed in genuine confusion. Wait, that's what this is about? His voice softened. Claire, I didn't realize. I saw the name Davis in the documents, but I didn't connect it to Vanessa. You've never. He trailed off and I realized the truth. I'd never told him. Not really. He knew I'd left the East Coast, under painful circumstances, knew there'd been betrayal. But I'd compartmentalized so hard, tucked away the ugliest pieces so neatly that even my husband couldn't piece them together. That night I finally told him everything. My mother's whispered sabotage, Vanessa's calculated cruelty, Ethan's slow betrayal, and the day I found them tangled in bedsheets like I'd never existed at all. I laid it all bare, not for pity, not for sympathy, but because it was time. I braced myself for James's outrage, for protective anger, but he just sat with it quiet, thoughtful. Maybe, he said after a long silence, it's time they saw who you've become. Not for revenge, Claire, but for closure. You've built a life that's yours. A life no one else mapped out for you, that's worth being seen. His words struck something inside me I hadn't known was still aching. I didn't want to humiliate them, I wanted to outgrow them, not to throw their failures in their faces, but to show without a single word just how wrong they'd been. We'll invite them, I said, breath catching in my throat. All of them, Ethan, Vanessa, even my mother. The next few weeks blurred in a haze of preparation and adrenaline. I poured my nervous energy into perfecting every detail from the locally sourced seafood menu to the zero-waste name cards and carbon-neutral car service. Our event coordinator even commented, "You've never been this hands-on before." She wasn't wrong. As I scanned the finalized guest list one afternoon, their names in black and white triggered a knot of long-buried emotions. What would they think, seeing me now? Would my mother still see me as the lesser daughter? Would Ethan regret what he'd thrown away? The questions circled, vulture-like. No matter how often I tried to swat them away, they returned. James found me one night, staring blankly at the invitation proofs. Having second thought, not about inviting them, I replied softly, just wondering if I'm doing this for the right reasons. Am I still trying to prove something? Am I still chasing their approval? He sat beside me, gently taking my hands in his. Only you can answer that, he said. But from where I'm sitting, you stopped needing anyone's approval the day you packed up and drove into Seattle with nothing but grit, heart, and a portfolio of dreams. He kissed my forehead. Whatever your reasons, I'll be right there, beside you. His steadiness calmed the churn inside me. The next morning, I gave final approval for the guest list without hesitation. The RSVPs trickled in, business partners, longtime investors, Merit Group's leadership team. Then the ones from Philadelphia arrived. Ethan Brooks would be attending as Merit's compliance officer. Vanessa Davis would accompany him as his wife. And most surprising of all, my mother Margaret Davis, responded with a short, impeccably penned note. Looking forward to reconnecting after all these years. 3 weeks before the event, the formal invitations went out. Elegant, minimalist designs printed on recycled paper with soy-based ink, sustainability in every detail, a reflection of our value. For my family's invitations, I added a handwritten message, looking forward to showing you the life I've built. Claire Bennett. As the gala drew closer, I found myself obsessing over something unexpected. It had to strike the perfect balance. Confident without being showy, elegant without screaming for validation. After dozens of stores and even more try-ons, I found it. A rich emerald gown that hugged without clinging, that brought out the green in my eyes, and whispered power without apology. Ready to face your past? James asked the night before the event, finding me rehearsing polite small talk in front of the bedroom mirror. Not really, I said, turning toward him with a small smile. I'm ready to showcase my presence. The Pacific Science Center had never looked more radiant. Uplighting washed the museum's arches in soft amber. Live jazz floated from the corner near the vertical garden wall. Tables were topped with native florals and bamboo menus listing every local, ethically sourced dish. This was us, James and me, on full display. We arrived early to finalize arrangements, then positioned ourselves by the entrance as guests began to flow in. Colleagues, clients, city officials. James in a tailored navy tux, me in my emerald arm. A simple diamond pendant rested at my collarbone, an anniversary gift from our 5th year. My once long hair, once so similar to Vanessa's, now fell in a sculpted bob that framed my face with intention. I felt unshakable, and then I saw my mother walked in first, her navy dress shouting old Philadelphia money. Vanessa followed, sleek and polished, Her arm looped through Ethan's. He looked older than I remembered, still handsome but weighed down somehow. They paused inside the entrance, scanning the room. For a moment I considered crossing the floor, but no. Let them find me. Let them see me in my world. Eventually their orbit brought them over. James and I were deep in conversation with the mayor about a proposed green energy initiative. When I felt a shift in the air, I glanced. Margaret noticed me first. Her carefully maintained smile faltered just a flicker, before she recovered. Vanessa's eyes widened in genuine surprise. Ethan looked from James to me and I watched understanding settle over him like a slow burn. Claire, my mother said first, stepping forward with performative grace. She embraced me lightly. You look absolutely radiant. Mother, I replied evenly, accepting her air kiss. I'm glad you made it. I turned. This is my husband, James Carter, co-founder and CEO of our firm. James Carter, Vanessa said, her voice just a hair too smooth. She extended her hand, always the strategist. Of course, I followed Carter and Bennett's growth for years. With all due respect, Miss Davis, James said, shaking her hand and slipping his other to the small of my back. Our success has always been a partnership. Claire's operational brilliance made the entire expansion possible. There it was, the flicker, the shift. They hadn't expected this narrative. They'd anticipated some reinvented version of the girl they left behind, maybe a bit shinier, more polished. What they got was a woman standing shoulder to shoulder with a man who saw her as an equal, not an accessory. Ethan Brooks, he said next, offering a polite handshake. Compliance officer with Merit Group. Yes, we're familiar with your role, James replied smoothly. Welcome to the family of companies. And that's when it clicked. I saw the light dawn in Ethan's eyes. You're Merit's new parent company, he said slowly, voice tight. Indeed, I confirmed, letting the words sit. The acquisition closed last month. James will be announcing it formally during his speech. I didn't need to rub it in. I didn't need to say anything else. They understood. The man who once left me for someone stronger now reported into a company I helped build. The sister who'd tried to replace me now stood beside him, not as the alpha but as the wife of a mid-level compliance officer. And my mother, who had once calculated my insignificance like a math equation, now found herself face to face with the result of her miscalculation. If you'll excuse us, James said graciously, we still have guests to welcome. Please enjoy yourself. As we moved away, I glanced back and caught Margaret watching me. Her expression was unreadable, somewhere between calculation and awe, like she couldn't decide whether to be proud or annoyed that I'd turned out to be the daughter worth betting on after all. The evening unfolded with choreographed precision. Dinner was served, each dish reflecting our sustainable mission, locally sourced, responsibly plated. Awards followed, honoring key team members, including several I had personally mentored, from interns to department heads. Through it all, I could feel their eyes on me. Vanessa, Ethan, my mother, watching as executives sought my input, as James referenced my role in every conversation, as I moved through the space with the ease of someone who knew exactly where she belonged. After dinner, James stepped up to deliver the welcome speech. He spoke, as always, with quiet eloquence, about ethical investment, environmental responsibility, and building companies that valued people and planet in equal measure. Then came the formal announcement: Merit Group's acquisition, the expansion of our sustainable investment wing, the integration of teams. As James spoke, Ethan stood uncomfortably to one side, nodding along, his smile tight. His presence during that moment felt poetic. A former partner of mine, now folded carefully, respectfully into something far greater than what he'd left behind. The power dynamic was unmistakable, and not accidental. Later, I stood at the dessert table when my mother approached, champagne in hand and social armor firmly in place. I always knew you'd do well, she said lightly, like history was just an old draft she could revise at will. You had such potential. Did I asked, voice calm. I seem to remember different commentary. She waved a hand dismissively. A mother pushes her children. Elizabeth needed confidence. You needed motivation. What I needed, I said gently, was support, and when I didn't get it, I built strength on my own terms. She sipped. Then perhaps I should thank James for seeing what I apparently missed. James saw me clearly, I replied, but he didn't create my success. We built it together, because we value each other as equals. That's the difference. Her smile faltered just slightly, then came the pivot. Her real reason for seeking me: Elizabeth and Ethan, they're having difficulties, she said, eyes scanning the room for effect. Perhaps you could put in a good word. Family should help family. There it was. Not connection, not remorse. Leverage. Some things it seemed, truly never change. Their performance will determine their future, I said evenly, just as mine did. Before she could respond, Vanessa appeared, deliberate as always. Ethan followed, half a step behind. Your husband's impressive, Vanessa. Age. Word sharp and measured. The way he commands the room. You've done well for yourself. It was meant as a compliment, but there it was, implied between every syllable, that my success was somehow borrowed. Reflected, not mine. We've done well together, I corrected, smiling without warmth. That's how real partnerships work. Something worth considering in your own arrangements. Vanessa's smile tightened. Ethan looked at the floor. The space between them crackled with strain, and not the productive kind. They had gotten what they wanted, and now they were learning what it cost. I didn't feel smug or cruel. I felt compassion, the kind you extend to someone who doesn't yet understand the lesson they're living. I should mingle, I said lightly. Enjoy the rest of the evening. Hours later, after the last guest had gone and the last light had dimmed, James and I stood barefoot in our kitchen, eating leftover flourless cake, straight from the box. How do you feel? He asked, watching me across the counter. Lighter, I admitted, surprised by my own answer. Like I've set down something I didn't even know I'd been carrying. He nodded. They seemed smaller than I imagined. They are, I said. Or maybe I've just grown, not in titles or status, but in what I understand now. Which is? He asked, leaning, that the only thing worth building is something real, something rooted in who you are, with someone who sees your value without needing to diminish it. James smiled, his eyes softening. So not revenge after all. No, I said. The strangest thing happened. Watching them tonight, seeing how unhappy they looked, even with everything they once schemed for, I didn't feel triumphant. I paused, fingers wrapping around his. I felt grateful. He raised a brow. If they hadn't betrayed me, I might never have left, never found Seattle, never met you, never discovered what I'm capable of creating. I squeezed his hand. Their cruelty gave me freedom, even if they never meant to. James pulled me into an embrace, warm and steady. That, he whispered, might be the most powerful kind of redemption. Not making others pay, but realizing they accidentally launched you into something infinitely better. Later, as we climbed the stairs to bed, tired but at peace, I understood what the night had truly given me. Not the satisfaction of proving anyone wrong, but the quiet, undeniable freedom of finally letting them go.